What should I drink next? Well, I got some diet Coke Zero. I got some Nelson Extra Enriched Protein chocolate milk. Uh, I got some. I got some plant-based milk. I got some almond milk. This is only 35 calories, but I hate the taste of it. It tastes like water. And I have some kombucha over here, and I got some soup. And so we're gonna decide what is the best beverage and the pluses and cons of what to drink. I'm really excited. Take it away, team.
Thank you for the intro, Dr. Curnew. Um, so as we head into the sunny, hot summer days, I'm sure we're all imagining a cool, refreshing drink in our hand to brace the summer heat. Now the question is, what's in that glass? Hi everyone, welcome to our weekly webinar. We are Anjana and Junie from the Cooking Club, and today we are investigating that question with a class on what's in the glass. Whether you're trying to reduce your sugar intake or quit drinking alcohol, or simply are just searching for some healthy drink options, this video is for you. Today, we're going to explore some of these options, including kombucha, plant-based milks, carbonated drinks, just like Dr. Curnew mentioned, and hopefully we can find the right drink for your glass. This is a broad overview of the topics we'll be covering today. Just a few drinks, but we're going to try to go as in-depth as we can. So first off, sweetened beverages, sugar-sweetened beverages, the enemy of everyone. I have my Coca-Cola right over here. So there's been a growing consumer interest in beverages with reduced sugars and calories, key nutrients, natural ingredients, but without compensating on taste. Now the key for many here is reducing sugar. The average total intake of sugars for Canadian adults is approximately 110 grams per day, which is equivalent to 26 teaspoons or 21% of total energy intake for a 2,000 calorie a day diet. Unsurprisingly, sugar beverages make up a significant amount of this intake. According to a recent Canadian Community Health Survey, sugary beverages such as soft drinks, milk and plant-based milks with added sugars, juices, teas, and coffees account for 23.6% of the average daily total sugar consumption for adults over the age of 19. Now, sugar-sweetened beverages, also known as sugary drinks, are liquids that include added or free sugars, such as high fructose corn syrup, sucrose or table sugar, fruit concentrates, and more. Examples of these sugar-sweetened beverages include, but are not limited to, regular non-sugar-free sodas, sports drinks, energy drinks, sweetened waters, non-100% fruit juices, and virtually any liquid beverage that has some form or is sweetened with some form of added sugar. Now, unfortunately, sugar-sweetened beverages remain a leading source of added sugars in the diet of Canadians, but as most of you will already know, provide little to no nutritional value and contribute to serious and potentially fatal chronic diseases like obesity, diabetes, and heart disease. So before you take another sip of your traditional soda, your Coca-Cola over here, we're starting off with the Coca-Cola. Let's understand why sugary soft drinks really have no place in your glass. So after consuming carbohydrates or sugars from a sugar-sweetened beverage, the body's digestive system breaks them down into glucose, a monosaccharide, and the simplest form of sugar. And this glucose is then absorbed into the bloodstream, and as blood sugar levels increase, pancreatic beta cells will produce insulin, a hormone that signals blood sugar to enter cells, for which it's used for energy or storage. And then with that absorption, blood sugar levels will decrease. Thus, the pancreas produces glucagon, which is a hormone that signals the liver to release stored glucose. And it's this balance of blood sugar and interplay of insulin and glucagon that maintains normal blood sugar levels. So in the development of type 2 diabetes, the body may either not make enough insulin or is unable to use or respond to insulin in the case of insulin resistance. So we're going to explore how sugar-sweetened beverages might impact this mechanism. Now, that was really brief, but to learn more about managing sugar and diabetes, head over to our Sugar Hour playlist on our YouTube channel, where you'll find in-depth and incredibly beneficial discussions on managing sugar and diabetes from our experts at the clinic. Okay, so let's start off with the liver, hepatic fatty acid synthesis, and its association with sugar-sweetened beverages. So this 2021 randomized control trial demonstrated how sugar-sweetened beverages may disrupt this mechanism we talked about above. Here, subjects consume sugar-sweetened beverages with moderate amounts of fructose, sucrose, or glucose, comparable to amounts in commercially available products, for a total of 80 grams of sugar a day. Now, the control consumed no sugar-sweetened beverages. So palmitate, which is measured here on the y-axis, is a product of carbohydrate-mediated lipogenesis, lipid production in the liver. Because palmitate accounts for about 75 to 85% of newly synthesized fatty acids by the liver, it is used as a proxy here for measuring newly synthesized or de novo fatty acids. On the y-axis, we see that the fractional secretion rate of palmitate is significantly increased in the fructose and sucrose group compared to the control group. In fact, consumption of beverages containing fructose resulted in a twofold increase in basal fractional secretion rate of newly synthesized fatty acids compared to the control. So ultimately, what we're seeing here is that regular consumption of both fructose and sucrose sweetened beverages in moderate doses, even with a stable caloric intake, as in the study, increased hepatic or liver fatty acid synthesis, which is an effect that they didn't observe in glucose consumption, which we'll explore coming up on the next slide. So what does this mean? Consumption of beverages containing fructose or sucrose increased hepatic de novo lipogenesis. Now, as we know, the liver metabolizes sugar and controls how much energy the body needs and stores. However, the body metabolizes fructose differently than glucose. In other words, in the presence of large quantities of fructose, the liver uses the excess fructose to create fat. As seen in this study, this excess sucrose intake also demonstrated this effect of increased fat production in the liver. So one potential result is non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, and subsequently the risk of type 2 diabetes and atherosclerosis, and also heart disease. This diagram also just shows another proposed mechanism by which high fructose diets may suppress fasting-induced adipose factors, causing lipoprotein lipase to become more active and trigger the uptake of short-chain fatty acids and triglycerides. So ultimately, what we're seeing in this diagram is that these beverages that are sweetened with fructose can lead to an accumulation of free fatty acids in the liver. And I did want to mention, additionally, it's not on the slide, the accumulation of fatty acids that are rich in palmitic acid, which we know is the product of that hepatic lipogenesis caused by excess dietary glucose, actually activates the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, or HPA axis, which causes the release of cortisol, and that can acutely impair insulin secretion and promote insulin resistance as well. So there's a lot of ways in which this consumption of fructose, something that you might not really look for on your beverage drink if you're not well versed with ingredient labels, is actually affecting our body in different ways, as we've just seen in the liver.
Actually, just backtrack one slide. This is actually something very important, is that one of the tipping points to your body, if the liver starts to accumulate fat, bad things happen. This tips you over to development of diabetes, to a triglyceride problem. And so what you're doing is you're causing heart disease, you're causing diabetes, as well as cirrhosis of the liver. And what's kind of interesting, you take a sugar drink and your body is converting it into fat, because these excessive calories go somewhere. And one of the places they get stored in the liver as fat. And that's a bad thing, a terrible thing. So, I guess I'm going to think about, if for those are having a can of Coke or any beverage, and I'm going to say this even to, one of the interesting things is that there's more sugar in apple juice than there is a can of Coke. And so, what you're going to tell us in a few minutes is that juices, liquid calories, is liquid trouble. So you got to pick the right liquid. And it's not those beverages that containing fruit juices, or containing the regular carbonated drinks, like all the canned Cokes and stuff like that. You mentioned is that a large consumption of calories comes from beverages. So one of the beverages that I'm drinking more of is just soup, homemade soup, rich in water. Really helps, and tomato based, not cream based. Tell us more. Very important.
So on the next slide, as we've discussed above, many of these sugar-sweetened beverages are sweetened with fructose or high fructose corn syrups. And these high fructose corn syrups are sugar-based sweeteners made from processed corn or hydrolyzed cornstarch. And they may also appear on your ingredient labels as glucose fructose, so not necessarily as high fructose corn syrup. And that is the case on actually, I believe, Coke. So on nutrition labels, this is a bit of it can be difficult to kind of navigate these if you're not well formed on the different forms of these sugars. And these high fructose corn syrups are actually very commonly found in processed foods and especially processed drinks, virtually all of these traditional sodas. However, despite being nearly identical to table sugar, except for their chemical structure, high fructose corn syrup is actually less expensive. So the low cost is real incentive for manufacturers, cheaper to use. Well, causation is debated. Like most sugar additives, high fructose corn syrups can contribute to those high fructose diets we were talking about earlier, and are also linked to, once again, that increased risk of diabetes, obesity, and heart disease, and all these other chronic illnesses. So on the next slide, we'll see just a quick correlation with type 2 diabetes. This is a 2015 meta-analysis that examined the association between sugar-sweetened beverage intake, including soft drinks, and the risk of type 2 diabetes. So what they found was higher intakes, generally around 1 or more servings per day, were compared to lower intakes of less than 1 serving per day or no consumption. And those pooled results showed that individuals with a higher intake of sugar-sweetened beverages were positively associated with a 30% higher risk of developing type 2 diabetes. And previous studies have found that to be 26%, so the study actually found to be 30%, which is consistent with previous findings. But once again, just to support that these sugar-sweetened beverages are really affecting different pathways in your body, and should be avoided. So just to add here as well, on the next slide, because sugar-sweetened beverages account for a major source of fructose in the diet, as fructose is rarely consumed in isolation, its intake has been investigated for its role in cardiovascular disease. So recent evidence has found that consumption of 1 or 2 servings of sugar-sweetened beverages a day is linked to a 35% greater risk of non-fatal myocardial infarction or heart attack, or fatal coronary heart disease, as well as a 16% increased risk of stroke compared to non-consumers. Thus, the data does support that there's a risk of cardiovascular disease that sugar-sweetened beverages may pose, along with continued associations with sugar and obesity, insulin sensitivity, and hypertension. So as we can see here, the Framingham Heart study has been an ongoing cohort study of cardiovascular disease since 1984. And it's really helped to identify common characteristics, major causal risk factors, and approaches to addressing cardiovascular disease and stroke. And in this 2020 US population-based prospective study, researchers used fasting plasma lipoprotein concentrations that were measured in the Framingham Offspring study and Generation 3 cohorts from subjects with a mean age of about 54.8 years old. And they used also their beverage intake levels from food questionnaires, ultimately to examine changes in lipoprotein measures over 12.5 years, including LDL or low density lipoprotein, HDL, high density lipoprotein, triglycerides, and non-HDL concentrations, and then the associated risk of dyslipidemia. So if we look at the left on this plot here, we see that for consumers of sugar-sweetened beverages, represented by that purple dot, what researchers found was that drinking more than 12 ounces per day of sugar-sweetened beverages, so about a can of Coke, was associated with a 53% higher incidence of high triglycerides and a 98% higher incidence of low HDL cholesterol, so your good cholesterol, compared to those who drank less than 1 serving per month. And the recent intake refers to the estimation of beverage exposures before developing dyslipidemia. However, as we can see, drinking low-calorie sweetened beverages in the blue, as well as 100% fruit juice in the orange, were not really associated with significant adverse risks of dyslipidemia. However, and that being said, the lower levels of high-density lipoprotein cholesterol and higher levels of triglycerides that were found to be associated with that increased consumption of sugar-sweetened beverages do provide evidence of potential risk factors for cardiovascular disease especially in middle-aged and older adults in this study specifically.
So it's very interesting. If you just backtrack, my understanding is the Framingham study started in 1948, so it's been around for an awful long time. They have multiple generations, and we can see the story about what you're drinking makes a difference. So you mentioned fructose, corn syrup, glucose, relatively inexpensive, tastes wonderful, causes the triglycerides to go up, increases risk of heart disease, diabetes, etc. And as we're going to talk about a little bit, is that the worst beverage right now is all these Cokes and Pepsis and things of that nature. In fact, when I was in the Army, we actually cleaned our gun with Coke. It's good at cleaning rifles, and that's corrosive as well. And so it's just one of those beverages that I'm kind of afraid of. And as you're going to point out, is that fruit juices are probably a step better, but it's not a health food, and it's for most of us it's a wrong thing. So very interesting finding. So keep telling us more.
Okay, so we're actually going to head right into artificial sweeteners and that mechanism. So diet sodas refer to a mixture of carbonated water with artificial or herbal sweeteners and other additives and preservatives. So the key to their marketing as sugar-free or calorie-free is the use of artificial sweeteners such as aspartame, saccharin, and sucralose, as well as the popular herbal sweetener stevia. Artificial sweeteners, which taste sweet due to their similarity in sugar molecules, which allows them to essentially be received by the sweetness receptors on our tongue. So they do retain sweetness. However, as they're only needed to be used in limiting amounts, they usually amount to fewer calories. And while they're often marketed and considered as healthier alternatives for diabetics and for weight loss, the data is conflicting and does not support conclusive evidence for causation, as most studies are observational. So several studies, including the Framingham Offspring study, have found that drinking diet sodas is positively associated with the prevalence of metabolic syndrome, or as we see here, a 53% higher adjusted prevalence, which is characterized by cardiometabolic risk factors, including abdominal obesity, hypertension, and dyslipidemia, which can ultimately increase the long-term risk for cardiovascular disease and events such as strokes. And while much research in this field is needed, the lack of unanimous conclusions prompt opportunities for better alternatives. However, that being said, as we mentioned before, they can be used as intermediates to quit those sugar-sweetened beverages that we were discussing before. And that's kind of the theme of our presentation today, how we can transition from unhealthy beverages. So it is a step in the right direction. However, the literature really doesn't support conclusive benefits. So we're going to investigate some healthier drink alternatives.
Just go back one slide again. So it's kind of interesting. This is actually, I think you really summed it wonderfully, but I'm going to give my 2 cents. So I've been thinking about this for about 20 years, and I can show you randomized data that took people that put artificial sweeteners in there versus having regular Coke and it showed that there was a modest weight reduction in some studies. But I can also, there's a recent meta-analysis that just came out the last week or so that took over 200 studies, both observational and randomized. And basically, the conclusions in my mind, I think, as you well pointed, I think it's certainly a better choice than regular sugared beverages. And the data where it shows increasing diabetes and metabolic syndrome and certain cancers, etc., are based on observation, because people that are prone to diabetes are drinking more diet drinks compared to people who are not. So what you're putting all this together is that there's also we're going to talk about, yes, you can tell us about things like kombucha and things of that nature as well. There's a concern is the microbiome or all the gut bacterias may be adversely affected by diet drinks as well. And that's an area that we still have a lot to learn about. My take-home message is to so over time, I've changed my beverage consumption. Growing up, I was always had to have a liter of milk a day, and we'll talk about that later. And I was probably smart. I was using skim milk just to get rid of the saturated fat. But I've changed my eating habits a lot, and I do like diet drinks, but I'm trying not to drink them. And what I'm doing right now is that I'll tell you the conclusion. I have some homemade kombucha. I have a soda stream maker. I put it. So what I do is I do a mixture of kombucha made by my wife. I put water to it. I put a touch of diet ginger ale in it, and I get the soda stream to make that. So I'm converting away, and it would be great if I can just drink water and nothing else, because that you're going to tell us about the world's best beverage, but we all have to make some choices here. So I think is right now that diet soft drinks are a step in the right direction, but they're not. It's not a health food, and I think we can do better than that. And so that's how we're going right now. And a few years ago, I was more pro diet drinks. Now I'm certainly less pro of them, but I understand the necessity for variation and things of that nature. As you pointed out before, is at one time alcohol was a good food, now it's a bad food. So we're learning all the time, and there's still the final chapter is not written, but the pendulum is switching away from diet drinks to having adverse effects again on people worry about cancer. And stevia is supposed to be that herbal stuff that you mentioned. It's nothing. I don't think stevia is a magical herb. I think it's the same thing as all the diet ones. And sucralose probably has the most safety data, and there's actually cancer data in animals at very high dose with things like saccharin so these are foods I'm trying to migrate away from as much as I can. I hope doesn't mess you up too much, but that's the way we should be heading that direction. I think you pointed that really nicely. So thank you so much. Tell us more.
So yeah, we're gonna start with our first healthy drink alternative, which honestly happens to be the easiest one here for people like me who are a bit lazy, maybe. So we have been hinting that water is really the best beverage, but one alternative to sugar beverages is infused water. The benefit here is obvious, as the principal ingredient is water. However, there's plenty of ways to naturally flavor water at your own discretion at home with fruits and vegetable slices of your own choice, and even the addition of mint and lime to add some sweetness and a bit of tang. And while you can simply infuse water with a pitcher, you can also buy certain water bottles that can help you carry them around with cartridges. But ideally, what you want to do is just cover your desired produce with water and ice, let it infuse overnight in the fridge, and then serve cold. So there's like a sample recipe that we have here from the Heart and Stroke Foundation. I don't even know if you can call this the recipe. It's very simple. If you can't do this, it's not going to get any easier in this presentation. But so yeah, just fruits of your own choice, and to infuse that, I do this, and it tastes pretty good if you're, not a fan of water by itself. But on the next slide, we're going to look at another healthier alternative, which is sparkling water, which is essentially water that is infused with carbon dioxide under high pressure. Perhaps the greatest benefit is also hydration, as sparkling water is just as hydrating as regular water. And without any added sugars, they can be a great alternative to sugary beverages. However, many commercially available sparkling waters will have minerals added, such as magnesium and calcium, but also sodium, which if you're already consuming a pretty high sodium diet, it's sort of an unnecessary. Calcium can increase fluid retention and increase blood pressure by increasing plasma volume expansion. So additionally, it's important to just check that nutrition label when you're looking at sparkling waters for added sugars, including artificial sweeteners and low-calorie options. And if carefully selected, these sparkling waters really can be a healthier alternative to carbonated sweetened beverages. So one thing we wanted to include here was a bit of our own version of a little bit of market research, because our club is traditionally known as the Healthy Eating for Less Club. So we do want to take into consideration that some of the options that we are investigating today, whether they be kombucha or things that are more marketed as organic and healthier beverages at stores, can be expensive. So this is a price obtained from Walmart Canada. It's about $6.97 to buy a pack of 12 Coca-Cola cans. That's 16 cents per 100 milliliters. As we can see here, we have the carbonated water, but also sugar, and then that fructose syrup, fructose corn syrup. And then there's 39 grams of sugar just in one can of Coca-Cola. So this is our baseline, good old friend Coca-Cola. We're going to use this to compare other alternatives. Okay, so here we have one option. I think this is probably one of the better options today, actually. Bubbly sparkling water is once again just a sparkling water with carbonated water and natural flavor. So as we can see here, there's 0 calories, 0 sugars, and no added sugars. And it's actually $1 cheaper. So there's very true, Daniel. I saw that look. It is cheaper, and it's about 14 cents per 100 milliliters. And so that's just one other option, just to be able to purchase sparkling water at the grocery store. Not everyone might have the means to make sparkling water at home. We considered adding it in this presentation. Dr. Curnew, I know you mentioned that you have a soda stream. That is something you can use to make sparkling water, but these are just some more commercial options that we thought we'd add just for.
You know, it's funny. I got it as a present from Jen, I think 1 or 2 Christmases ago. I just used it yesterday for the first time. It's been sitting there. I didn't know how to use it. You just have to just press it and it works. And yeah, so get them when they're on sale.
Okay, and we've reached the fruit juices. So this is something also that a lot of people may know, but not consider when they're comparing fruit juices with actual whole fruits. So despite 100% fruit juices not falling into sugar sweetened beverages, that category, and containing natural sugars, they are still high in sugars and total sugars. We pulled a study over here that assessed weight loss specifically in postmenopausal women over 4 years. And what they found was that with an increased serving, or 1 serving a day of 100% fruit juice consumption, there was a 0.5 pound increase, or they had an increase of 0.5 pounds or weight gain over 4 years. Whereas for whole fruit, that 1 serving was actually associated with almost a pound of weight loss. So it just goes to show how, despite being over 4 years, the same fruit, just in 2 different forms, can potentially have 2 very drastically different impacts on something like weight gain and weight loss and weight changes in your weight. So that's something we wanted to just mention there. And then we do have a slide on the next slide that kind of puts that into perspective again. Specifically comparing orange juice and a serving of orange. So this is an 8-ounce serving of 100% orange juice that has about 23 grams of sugar. I know Dr. Curnew mentioned some of these fruit juices have more sugar than Coke or like sugar sweetened beverages, and that's true. 23 grams of sugar is not a small amount of sugar, and that's when you're comparing it to the same orange, just as a whole fruit has 12 grams of sugar. That's almost double the amount of sugar. And you're going to consume that juice quite a lot faster. As well, here we see there's a comparison: 110 calories compared to 73 calories. So once again, the more calorie-wise option is just a whole fruit. And then also with 100% fruit juices, we're losing actually the dietary fiber that is in fruits that can help reduce cholesterol and lower the risk of heart disease. So we're losing that fiber-dense nature of a whole fruit when we start to convert them into juices.
So you can see, you can understand really why if you have juice, you're going to gain weight, and if you're having the actual fruits, you're going to lose weight. So you actually mentioned that quite nicely. And so for some of us who really, so basically we don't have fruit juice on the house anymore. But for those who want to think about cutting down on that, what you can do if you want to is just dilute it. Just make it half juice and half water if you want to, for instance. Um, but just ways of progressing to get off of that, and is that we're supposed to have 5 to 10 servings of fruits and vegetables every day, and don't count fruit juice as a serving. I think some people do that. That's a mistake. And so just think about this. So thank you for sharing that. You can see a clear difference. Thank you.
And just as you said, Dr. Curnew, it's no longer a recommendation on the Canadian Food Guide. Fruit juice isn't a recommendation for those servings of fruits, and it's recommended to get that from whole fruits, actually. So, but that concludes our bit on sugar sweetened beverages for now, and we're going to head on to Junie, who's going to explain some of our milks for us.
So again, then so we've shown that water in different formats are the best thing, and that diet drinks are a suspect, and fruit juices are a suspect as well now. Tell us more. What's the next step?
Yeah, so definitely many different alternatives that you can take for those sugar sweetened beverages and fruit juices. So that was a very important segment for drinks. And now we're going to move on to sort of another big category, which is milks. So we're going to be talking a little bit about plant-based milks. So first, to look into what they are, plant-based milk is a very common and also widely available alternative now to cow's milk. And there can be a lot of different factors that could influence you to switch to plant-based milk. Some of which may include that they include less fat, calories, and also sugars. So especially for those of you who want to consume milk regularly, but you need to work on things like weight loss or sugar control, this is a very good option to consider. And it's also safe for people who have allergies, lactose intolerance, or those of you who are vegan. So all of these factors combined, plant-based milk consumption is becoming more common in today's market. And with that, the consumption of regular cow's milk has decreased by 13% between 2017 to 2022. Okay, so now we'll just dive a little bit deeper into exploring the common types of plant-based milks. So there really is like a very wide abundance of types like soy milk, oat milk, almond milk, coconut milk, pea milk. There's also like very interesting ones like sesame milk or cashew milk. And each of these actually has their own like distinct notable properties and nutritional values. But today we'll be focusing a bit more on some of the more commercially available and consumer-friendly ones like soy milk, almond milk, and oat milk. So first we'll be taking a little look into soy milk, which is a staple made from soybeans. So research has shown us that soy milk is a very excellent source of essential unsaturated fatty acids. So unlike saturated fatty acids, the unsaturated ones are actually considered beneficial because what they do is that they lower your bad cholesterol, also known as low density lipoprotein or LDL, and they also reduce inflammation and stabilize your heart rhythms. In addition, the main functionally active component of soy milk is called isoflavones, and these are a type of plant estrogen that have also been proven to help lower that bad cholesterol while increasing the good HDL cholesterol. So soy milk can be considered to be a cardioprotective drink with additional benefits like protecting against cancer and also osteoporosis. And to learn a bit more about the different types of cholesterols and also how to manage your high cholesterol levels, make sure to check out our webinar, Living with High Cholesterol, on Dr. Curnew's YouTube page. Okay, so now we'll move on to almond milk. So this is also a very milk. Almonds are a very good nutrient and vitamin source, both alone and also when compared to other plant-based milks that are available. So one ingredient that's very abundant in almond milk is vitamin E. So we'll be taking a closer look at exactly what it is and its mechanism later, but it's very good because vitamin E is not synthesized naturally in our bodies, but we do need it because it's a very important antioxidant, and that means it helps protect our cells from damage by free radicals. And right about here, I'm going to go into a brief overview of these concepts that I just talked about. So a free radical really just refers to any sort of atom or molecule that has an unpaired electron. and that unpaired electron makes them very highly unstable and reactive. So these free radicals are actually being constantly formed in our bodies, and they're necessary to some extent because damaging effects on your DNA and also your tissues. And kind of in the long run, if it's not controlled for, it can lead to very serious conditions like diabetes, cancer, and also like a number of cardiovascular diseases. Okay, but returning back to almond milk, one thing that's really good about it is that actually just 1 cup or 240 milliliters of it actually provides you 110% of your daily suggested vitamin E intake. So that's a very like easy and just great way to obtain more antioxidants and also keep those free radicals in check. And among some other benefits of almond milk are that it's very rich in calcium, magnesium, and potassium, all of which are cardioprotective and also effective against lowering high blood pressure levels. Okay, so now we're just going to take a quick look at oat milk. So this is another type that has very similar therapeutic benefits. So it also lowers cholesterol and has antioxidant and anti-cancer properties. But unlike the other ones, oat milk also contains dietary fibers. One notable one is called beta-glucan. It's a functionally active component in oat milk. And thanks to these beta-glucans, as well as something else called polyphenols, these ingredients together in oat milk help to reduce inflammation, improve digestion, circulation, and also, most importantly, they help increase your insulin sensitivity, which means that you're going to get better blood sugar regulation. So yeah, this definitely makes oat milk a very attractive option for those of you who need to watch out for your sugar levels. Okay, some other types of plant milks that may be available include coconut milk, which is rich in vitamin C and E, and it also has anti-carcinogenic and antioxidant properties, as well as pea milk, which is rich in iron, calcium, potassium, and also vitamins A and D. Okay, so a lot of these have already been alluded to, but some of the main and recurring vitamins that are abundant in plant-based milks are vitamins C, E, and D. So we're just going to be taking a bit of a further look into their properties as well as how they're absorbed in your body to aid your understanding and knowledge. Okay, so first off, for vitamin C, this is actually a water-soluble vitamin, and it's completely absorbed in the distal part of your small intestine. So vitamin C is very essential in our bodies for things like collagen biosynthesis, and also it helps to enhance absorption. One thing about it is though is that it's not naturally synthesized in our bodies, so it can actually only be obtained through dietary intake. And when vitamin C is ingested, it's absorbed across our intestinal epithelial cells, and this mainly occurs by membrane transporters. So there's two different types of transport that vitamin C can undergo, and there's also two different types of forms that vitamin C can take, and depending on the form, they go through different transportation mechanisms. So when the vitamin C is in its reduced form, it's also known as ascorbic acid, abbreviated as ASC. It goes through sodium-coupled active transport via something called the SVCT1 transporter, which is blue as seen in this diagram, and that's how it gets absorbed into your cells. When it's in its oxidized form, however, it's called dehydrated, DHA for short, and in that case, it goes through facilitated diffusion, and that's through the GLUT1 and GLUT3 receptors, which are yellow seen in this diagram. And once the DHA is inside the epithelial cells, it's then converted to the ASC form, which allows it to be transported into the blood stream and also our circulations. And then it can just circulate around and be used whenever it's needed. Okay, so moving on to vitamin E. Unlike vitamin C, it's a fat-soluble vitamin, so it has a bit of a different mechanism. And its major role, as discussed earlier, is to be an antioxidant and keep our free radicals in check. So although it's also absorbed in our small intestines, it has a much more like complex um, and kind of like multifaceted absorption mechanism. So in order to be uptaken by our intestinal cells, it first needs to go through a transformation actually. So there's secretions, bile secretions, and also pancreatic secretions that contain lipoproteins and also fats that are kind of combined with the vitamin E. And when the vitamin E combines with these lipoproteins, it forms a structure called a micelle, that's seen in the picture on the bottom here. And that just means the hydrophobic parts of the molecule aggregate on the inside for protection from water. And through this conversion to a micellar form, the vitamin E can then finally be uptaken into the cells. And because of this, it's actually also been proven by studies that taking vitamin E into your intestine retention of calcium and phosphorus. So in simple words, it's a very, very critical vitamin for our bone health. And the actual mechanism of vitamin D absorption doesn't really have much data to back it up, but it's also believed to be through some sort of passive diffusion. More importantly though, in terms of calcium absorption, vitamin D is actually very, very essential, as we'll demonstrate in a bit. So TRPV6 is a calcium channel that's located on our intestinal cells, and it actually facilitates calcium absorption into those cells. That calcium absorption is regulated by something called 1,25-OH2, which is actually just the biologically active form of vitamin D. And because of that, you can see that vitamin D is very essential for calcium absorption. So when there's more of it, you get more efficient calcium absorption. So to back this up, studies have actually shown that without adequate vitamin D levels, our body only absorbs 10 to 15% of dietary calcium, whereas with sufficient levels, that number rises to 30 to 40%, which is a very, very substantial and noticeable difference. Other than the notable exception of almond milk, which is. And in terms of protein, we can see that soy milk is actually as great a protein source as cow milk, but almond milk and oat milk fall a bit short in this regard. On the other hand, though, for calcium, soy milk really lacks calcium content compared to regular milk, but almond milk and oat milk can provide even greater amounts of calcium. So it's also interesting, lastly, to note that cow milk has 20 milligrams of cholesterol, but all of these plant milks, since they have no animal. But if you're more open to kind of different things, you could, for instance, kind of mix and match the different. One of them can make up for what the other one lacks. So for example, you could drink soy milk and almond milk together, and that would supply you with adequate protein and calcium respectively.
So this is actually a wonderful slide. If you look at this, now interesting is that cow's milk. I drink skim milk, and that just will have like 90 calories in it, just without the fat. And if you look at calcium content, be very careful. Just this is some of the plant-based milks have added calcium, some do not, and so always just look at those labels all the time. I think really important to see that difference. And um, I one of the things is most of us need at least 1,000 milligrams of calcium a day, and traditionally the major source of calcium from us is dairy products. So and so how to change that? And in the past, many of the plant-based milks weren't enriched with calcium. And the other thing too is when you're doing, make sure you shake it, because sometimes the calcium will stick to the actual container, not get inside to yourself there. So there's some clues there as well. So I guess at some point in time we'll talk about advantages and disadvantages of dairy milk versus other milks as well, pluses and minuses. So we'll come back in a little bit later. But thank you. Keep telling us more. What are some of the choices there?
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, okay, and speaking of additives, so
You can go back one more slide again. So
yeah.
one of the things that when I go to the grocery store, what I'm looking at is I think I stare at calories first. I stare at price. And one of this, here's Nelson's Joy of Nelson milk. It had 2 times the extra protein in it. You see, so but each serving contains 150 calories to it. So getting proper protein, you need about 1 to 1 grams per kilogram per day. And what I tend to buy is I look at the price, what's on sale that week, and so I have a mixture of all of the above there, and And you mentioned that silk almond 30 calories sounds good, but to me it tastes kind of watery sometimes. But well, oat milk has a richer taste to it, so I like that in my coffee. So one of the things I find it's interesting is that is in coffee right now is that I find that oat milk gives that creamy texture for those who want to switch off the cream into something healthier. That's a choice there, and um, lots of good discussions there. So personally, what I've done right now is I've reduced my dairy milk by half, and I increased my my plant-based milk by half too as well. I'll tell you why that at the end too as well. Keep telling us more.
Yeah, for sure. So we've talked about a lot of the kind of benefits of plant-based milks, having less cholesterol, less sugars, also a lot of vitamins that are helpful for you. But there's some things to be very wary of, which are potential additives. So we're just going to go over a few of the common ones that you might see on the labels. And like Angela said, this is why, again, you should always check that nutrition label. But yeah, so the first one is guar gum, which has its purpose in extending shelf life and also it helps thicken the consistency of the milk. But it actually promotes a lot of gastrointestinal issues such as gas, bloating, diarrhea, also inflammation, and it can cause obstructions in your small intestines as well. And it's also a very common allergen, so it could be a concern for people with food allergies. The second one is carrageenan. So it comes from red seaweed and it's also used as a thickener. But similarly to guar gum, it can promote very serious GI issues, inflammation, and also even cancer in the long run. Moving on, you should always look for the vague ingredient that says natural flavors because this actually just means usually that the flavors have been isolated from its original source and developed inside some type of lab environment. So their purpose is to create or enhance flavor, but really you don't know what's going into your body. And when it says natural flavors, this could actually just be a huge combination of different ingredients from like 1 to 100 that they wouldn't have to write down, so you wouldn't actually know. Um, and also, lastly, you might want to keep on the lookout for things like evaporated cane juice, cane sugar, or cane syrup, because all of these are actually devoid of nutrients and they're 99% sucrose, meaning that they're ultimately like pure sugar. So, basically, all of this being said, although unsweetened, if you can get that, is the best. Swapping out these cane sugars for healthier alternatives like raw agave or maple syrup could also help you watch out for your blood glucose levels. And remember that when it comes to a decision between either synthetic or natural ingredients, you always want to choose natural. And on that note, we're just going to segue a bit into a recipe where you can make your own almond milk at the comfort of your own home. So the ingredients you will need are listed here, just being very simple: 1 cup of raw almonds, which are soaked overnight in cool water, or 1 to 2 hours in very hot water. 5 cups of filtered water, 1 pinch of sea salt if you would like, but that of course can be omitted. Just like a nut milk bag, or you can use a thin dish towel, as well as just a blender to blend everything together. Okay, so on this slide, you can see the instructions are written out. They're very simple and also straightforward to follow, so I'm not going to read them out, but you can feel free to take screen captures of these 2 slides and definitely give this recipe a shot. Okay, and yeah, so that was all about plant-based milks, and now we'll be moving on into kombuchas as another drink alternative.
So let's just backtrack one more slide there. One more slide again. So one more slide again. Just backtrack one more. So one more again. I'm sorry. So when you get to the grocery store, you have some choices there, including milk. So I think you have to look at calories. You have to look at price. You have to look at what's in there as well. And there's an association. There's a debate right now. Do dairy products promote cancers? For instance, there's an association with dairy products and breast cancer and prostate cancer. But also dairy is relatively cheap form of protein. It's a good source of calcium, and uh, and the dietary literature is a little bit confusing in this area. And so what I'm trying to do is that, first of all, if you care about the environment, for instance, almonds are very water intense in its growing. So that's something that if you're worried about water supply to the world, then things like almonds may be eaten in less, oats and soy. We're lucky on our farm, we grow soy every few years. So I have soy bags of it, and I keep it stored in a cool, dry place, and it'll last you for years if you keep it dry, and use it all sorts of different things. And so I, I think these things are good, and I think you should try them on, and try them, especially when they're on sale at different times, just to see what suits your taste. Now, um, look at sugar content, look at taste. I really fell in love with oat milk and in coffee at this point in time. I love soy as well, and I do enjoy all these as well. So. And I do have some dairy, and I use always the skim milk form as well. But there is association with potentially heart disease, breast cancer, prostate cancer, and cancers with dairy. But that's not consistent, and it's not accepted by everybody. So if you can have dairy, which I think is wonderful, for many people enjoy it, make sure it's fat free for those who want to do that, because one glass of regular milk is 150 calories. One glass of skim milk is 90 calories. So it's a huge difference. It has the same nutrient value except for just saturated fat, which we think is potentially harmful for cholesterol. My wife loves Greek yogurt, and she feels she likes the extra protein content. And so you can certainly get protein from plant-based source. And as you mentioned very clearly, that soybean has a high source of protein in as well. So thank you for sharing all that information. So lots of choices here. Make good choices. So let's hear about kombucha.
Okay, so now we get into kombucha, which it's sort of foreign territory for a lot of people. Continuing on with our market research, with the high prevalence of chronic diseases and increase and health awareness, consumers are now seeking health aids through diet. And this has opened up a really large market for healthy products on grocery shelves. And one trendy shelf inhabitant is kombucha, the fermented tea that, despite being around for 2,000 years, was reborn again in domestic markets as an increasingly popular health beverage. In 2021, the global kombucha market was valued at 2.59 billion US dollars, and it's expected to grow at a compound annual growth rate of 15.7% to 2030. And then the forecasted revenue in 2030 is 11.4 billion. So the reason why we put this here is just that it's clear that kombucha has growing market potential, but we want to investigate if these numbers really support its therapeutic and health effects and benefits for medical conditions. So we're going to investigate that. So what is kombucha? I don't know about you, but I didn't know about kombucha until a few years ago. So kombucha is a beverage made by fermenting tea, typically black, green, oolong, or some sort of type of tea, really, of your choice, with the symbiotic culture of bacteria and yeast, or SCOBY, and sugar to activate that yeast. So this fermentation process produces a fizzy, sweet, and sour sort of drink that serves to replace unhealthy drinks like highly sugar-sweetened beverages and alcoholic drinks. Kombucha is classified as a functional beverage, which is a liquid food that is marketed to highlight specific ingredients in it with a proposed nutritional and health benefit. And this is mainly due to its vitamin and nutrient content. But just to mention that kombucha has found its place as a very trendy functional beverage, but that doesn't mean that doesn't overshadow any supposed health benefits. So one thing I might have mentioned here that we're going to talk about on the next slide that I definitely did not know about is SCOBY. So SCOBY and its chemical reactions that it induces in kombucha during that fermentation process are what provide it with that fizzy, sweet, sour, unique taste that kombucha has. So SCOBY, as seen in this picture, appears as a rubbery biofilm sort of disc-like structure, and it contains literally a symbiotic culture of yeast and bacteria, as well as cellulose. Bacteria being prokaryotic cells with no nucleus and yeast being eukaryotic cells together make the ingredients for symbiotic fermentation, in which two different organisms interact ultimately to produce this product. So after allowing the SCOBY to ferment with sweetened tea, there are two fermentation processes that you can see in this diagram. The first is alcoholic fermentation via yeast cells. So as we add sugar to the kombucha mixture, and we'll go through a little bit of a recipe or run through a little later on, but essentially as you add sugar to the kombucha mixture, the yeast in the SCOBY will break down that sucrose into glucose and fructose. And as that fermentation progresses, the yeast will convert it into ethanol or alcohol and carbon dioxide. And here's where the second fermentation process, acetic acid fermentation, begins via bacteria. So the bacteria in the SCOBY will then convert the alcohols and remaining sugar into organic acids like acetic acid. So here we can see the composition of kombucha. So we can see really where this taste is coming from, where it's getting this unique taste from in terms of its composition. So obviously the fizziness is attributed to that CO2 or carbon dioxide product. The sweetness is induced by those added sugars in the brewing process or brewing stage that perhaps have not been converted. And then the alcohol might be present in kombucha if there's leftover ethanol. And then ultimately, the conversion to organic acids is what causes that sour, tangy taste. And here are some examples of organic acids, sugars, alcohols, and vitamins that might be found in kombucha that really make up this diverse nutrient profile of kombucha. And it's important to note that the longer that kombucha is fermented, the more ethanol is converted into acetic acid, providing for a more acidic and tart taste, but less sugar, hence becoming less sweet. So we just thought we'd add that in there just because it is interesting to see how this yeast and bacteria is really working together to create this unique concoction that is kombucha. Okay, so kombucha is thought to have originated in northeastern China, previously Manchuria, in 220 BC. And then around 414 AD, kombucha made its way to Japan and East Asia for medicinal properties. And then through trade routes, by the early 20th century, kombucha was brought to Europe, and in particular, Germany and Russia. And during World War II, kombucha was actually popularized due to rationing of tea and sugar. However, in the 1990s, it entered the US during the HIV/AIDS epidemic. It was during this time that kombucha was thought to increase T cell count and support weakened immune systems. And thus it found its way into US markets on a medicinal basis, which we see today really dominating markets. However, its greatest resurgence occurred in the early 2000s with the increasing awareness of health benefits and fermented foods in North American markets. So we see a lot of different fermented foods being promoted now, like kimchi and sauerkraut and other different food sources, but kombucha definitely tops one of the most popular in terms of fermented foods that really have dominated our North American markets. Okay, and before we get into some of the evidence behind or the scientific evidence that supports kombucha, it's important to note that there are limited completed clinical trials that provide a scientific basis for the human implications of many of the claims that kombucha markets. In fact, many trials and many claims are actually based on rat studies. And that being said, research will continue to be done to investigate the therapeutic benefits of kombucha. However, for now, it's important to understand that a lot of these aren't results that indicate causation, but merely start as a serving point for further investigations. So the first benefit that we're going to explore is kombucha being a source of probiotics. And this is probably one of the most marketed benefits that you'll see of kombucha, and that is having probiotic components. So probiotics are defined as live microorganisms such as live bacteria and yeast that support digestive health and regulation of the gut microbiota. And as we've learned, kombucha consists of a large colony of a variety of yeast and bacteria, or that SCOBY, which can contain species of bacteria, for example, that are widely understood to have probiotic functions. So in this study, kombucha samples were fermented DNA was extracted from them, and through DNA amplification and sequencing, it revealed the diversity of the microbial population in the kombucha samples. And here we can see that in the brown, gluconectobacter and was present at around 85% in these samples, and lactobacillus was present up to 30% in these samples. So the reason why we add this is sort of to support what's on the next slide, in that if we take, for example, lactobacillus, which is present, as we've seen in kombucha samples, it is actually a lactic acid fermenting bacteria, which are the most common probiotics used in foods. And most will recognize their presence in yogurt cultures. So with microbial species with these probiotic capacities, an association with the restoration of the gut microbiota in response to unhealthy bacteria can be implied. And as such, kombucha may aid in digestion, and by replacing that bad bacteria may actually prevent microbial infection and support the immune system. So probiotics are often taken by supplements, as they're not as common in the diet. So this really opens room for kombucha as a food source for probiotics. So despite there not being evidence that directly correlates or relates kombucha to this probiotic components or capacity, it's more so the components of these bacteria and how they can contribute to the probiotic components of kombucha. And those are the studies that have been completed. The next benefit that we're going to look at is antioxidants. So Junie kind of mentioned this before, but kombucha, as we know, is made from steeped tea. And tea is a polyphenol, which is a naturally occurring phenol or compound in plants that serves as a dietary reducing agent or an antioxidant. And like Junie discussed before, oxidative stress really occurs when there's that imbalance between reactive oxygen species or free radicals and our endogenous antioxidant capacity. So tea polyphenols can increase that antioxidant capacity, neutralize free radicals by donating an electron, and ultimately reduce oxidative stress and subsequent symptoms such as chronic inflammation, atherosclerosis, cardiovascular disease, and actually neurodegenerative diseases like Parkinson's, just to name a few. So there is that added benefit of the fact that kombucha is tea. So it has this tea polyphenol antioxidant product in it. So in the following study, samples of kombucha steeped with green, black, red, and white tea were obtained. And the antioxidant activity was one parameter that was measured using DPPH, which is a powder composed of stable free radical molecules. So overall, the study found that the antioxidant potential ranged between 70.62% and 94.61% in terms of DPPH inhibition. So through this mixture that they were, through the study that they were able to find, where they're taking these samples of the kombucha and reacting them with these free radical molecules, it actually was found that green tea has the highest or significantly higher antioxidant potential over time, and it's characterized by the highest polyphenol content of those four teas. So just once again, trying to back up the fact that there is evidence that supports antioxidant properties in kombucha. So the next study that we found that supports the benefit of kombucha being an promoting anti-diabetic aspects refers mostly, the study actually is quite recent and is one of few controlled studies or randomized placebo-controlled studies. This one specifically looked at low glycemic diets, which referred to those that have little effect on blood glucose levels, which kombucha had previously been associated with. And in this study, they took 11 healthy subjects who consumed 3 reference glucose solutions, as you can see with the gray lines over there, with high glycemic index diets, including white rice and soy sauce. And then with that meal, they accompanied it with either kombucha, a diet lemonade soft drink, and then soda water, which was the placebo, or no drink. And what researchers were able to find was that after consuming kombucha, the glycemic index value lowered to 68, while the GI value for soda water was 86, and the diet soda soft drink was 84. So what this data actually supports is that kombucha can reduce that postprandial or after meal blood sugar spike when consumed with a high glycemic index meal compared to soda water and even a diet soft drink. So this is the first controlled study to do so. However, the sample size is quite small, and it's noted in the study that different kombuchas may have a different effect. So it's not necessarily generalizable to all kombuchas. However, once again, just provides something to think about as to support that there is some evidence that supports these benefits. Now, this also kind of
back up one more slide. This is amazing. This is one of the things that we're trying to do is prevent the spike in sugar. And you've shown this beautifully in this randomized trial. So this is really extremely well done. Obviously, this needs to be replicated in different ways, but this is amazing. Thank you. I'm gonna have some more kombucha.
Okay, so just going off again for that kombucha and its anti-diabetic components. This study actually, and I'd like to stress this because I did want to add a rat study in here, just because a lot of the claims that you'll see on the internet as consumers can be misleading when a lot of them are citing papers that are animal studies. And that's not to discredit animal studies, it's just that the claims really shouldn't be promoting human health benefits when they're citing animal studies right away. So this study actually does hold some value for starting points for future clinical investigations as well. This study found a significant decrease in plasma glucose levels in diabetic rats that consumed kombucha compared to no consumption. So, and this effect was really only observed in the diabetic rats though. So it just shows how these animal studies might have different limitations to them. But they do provide some basis for kombucha's role in reducing the risk of diabetes and insulin resistance. On the next slide, though, is the same study. However, it investigates plasma lipid concentrations in the same mice. And what we can see here, compared to the diabetic mice that consumed no drink, there was actually a significant reduction in blood triglycerides, low density lipoprotein, cholesterol, and as well as this, kombucha supplements were able to revert the decrease in high density lipoprotein cholesterol. So what this study once again supports is that there is a potential for an improved lipid profile with kombucha consumption. However, once again, human studies are required to verify any causation. And as Dr. Curnew said, replication and reproducibility and studies that are experimental, not only observational, are what are really going to solidify whether there is a causation between kombucha and some of these beneficial factors. So these are all just food for thought, things to think about, to be aware of. Making sure that you're reading up on some of those claims before you completely believe them. Okay, so we talked a lot about alcohol at our cooking club, but here we just wanted to, we've been throwing around this equation quite a bit. This is the breakdown of glucose into ethanol and carbon dioxide. So some of you might be thinking, does kombucha count as an alcoholic beverage? So after the second fermentation, kombucha may contain small traces of alcohol despite remaining ethanol being converted to acetic acid via bacteria. So a typical commercial kombucha has less than 0.5% alcohol by volume. So they're considered non-alcohol beverages, and they have traces, and hence can be obtained from stores. And in Canada, alcohol is considered greater than 1.1% ABV. So as a non-alcoholic alternative, can kombucha substitute alcohol? Our answer here is that yes, once again, with this continued theme of this presentation of intermediates, things we can use to switch to healthier alternatives, kombucha definitely can act as an intermediate and ease a transition from a high alcohol consumption diet, ultimately to unsweetened or naturally sweetened beverages. Thus, kombucha can act as definitely a healthier alternative. A note to also make is that if you're making kombucha at home, you can either brew it at a lower temperature or utilize less added sugars to minimize the amount of alcohol that might be in the kombucha.
Go back one more again. This is an important consideration here. So to me, to drink alcohol or not, you did an excellent video. I'm not sure if you're gonna, but we can make sure we put that in a little bit later. Is that you know, at one time alcohol was a health food. Now it's basically, it causes multiple cancers associated with atrial fibrillation, dementia, bleeding issues, cirrhosis of the liver. People already know about, and brings up triglycerides. So if you have a triglyceride problem, alcohol is no good. You mentioned kombucha lowers triglycerides. So this is actually the exact opposite. And you know, there are fine wines. This is a fine kombucha here. This is brewed by my lovely wife. She doesn't drink it yet, but I love this stuff. And you know, is that some people like, you know, good beer. You know, when I remember when we first got married, you know, summertime was, you know, I was at hard lemonade, those drinks and things of that nature. Is that I basically, I'm developing blockage formation. I'm at risk for cancer formation, and I have to make some changes before it's too late. And this has been a wonderful alternative. I hope people start to explore this. Um, I think anybody who started off drinking red wine for the first time probably hated it. Is that you know, it's supposed to be acquired taste. This is an acquired taste, but it's a good, healthy acquired taste. And this is one option. I'm not saying it's the option for you, but it's a remarkable beverage, and we have a lot to learn about this. And remember, as you point out, what you can show in rats and things of nature doesn't mean you can show that in humans. Now, if you know my family, some of it looks more like rats and things of that nature as well. Just kidding. But basically, is that there's a lot more exploration that's been done over here. And you actually showed the slide that I really like the most is that randomized controlled trial in humans, where you show the blood sugar and the blood triglyceride rises less after a meal. And that's an important consideration, because that's actually very, very important. And but we still have a lot more to go in this area. Thank you so much. Tell us more.
Okay, so back to our market research. This is actually one that I saw in Dr. Kearney's office. And this is Remedy Kombucha. A little more of a pricier point over here. But as we can see, the ingredient list does include how the company has, what they've included in their kombucha fermentation process. As we can see here, they've added obviously raw sugar that is required for yeast activation. They've also included stevia leaf extract, so there's artificial sweetener in there. However, one that I wanted to draw attention to, and this is more of something that I was interested in mentioning, is this artificial sweetener or sugar alcohol over here called erythritol. So on the next slide, so we can see here, we highlighted this one just because I actually have this in my house too, but you know, I didn't actually know what, you know, not many people would know what that artificial sweetener is. But there is actually a recent paper that was published that in which researchers were investigating how diet may affect, or essentially how they were assessing different components in our blood. In the study, they this kind of connects back to our discussion on artificial sweeteners, but this 2023 study that appeared in Nature Medicine, actually, it included 1,000 individuals, and it tracked levels of compounds in their blood, and as well as tracked cardiovascular events such as non-fatal heart attack, stroke, or death over 3 years. And what they found was this component, erythritol, is a naturally occurring artificial sweetener. It's a sugar alcohol. It's synthesized from corn as a sugar substitute. It's actually found in a lot of people's diets. And it was actually, along with other artificial sweeteners, it was associated with an increased risk of cardiovascular events. So what you see here in this graph, or in this initial cohort and plot, is an association that was reproduced also in a US and Europe validation cohort. And individuals with the highest erythritol levels in the top 25% were around twice as likely to have cardiovascular events over 3 years of follow-up as those with the lowest bottom 25%. So it's just one of those things that I was looking at. Previous studies have also contested for the positive benefits of this artificial sweetener, and argued with these observational studies not being as comprehensive. So there is that, once again, that the benefits / disadvantages of artificial sweeteners are just continuously contested. On the next slide, though, what they also found was that how diet might affect these levels of this artificial sweetener. And they used 8 participants with and gave them 30 grams of this erythritol sweetened beverage and assessed their plasma levels over 7 days. And what they discovered was that blood, the levels of this sweetener in the blood increased by 1,000-fold and remained elevated for a few days, and well above thresholds observed for concentrations of erythritol that elicit significant increases in multiple parameters for platelet function, as seen in that diagram above there. And it might indicate a risk for blood clot formation, which actually, when the scientists studied mice in the study, showed how increased blood erythritol levels sped up blood clot formation, artery blockage in the mice. So this just goes to support how the sweetener might have some potential risks, once again, in blood clot formation. But it's just the way that these sweeteners are invading our bodies and have different ways of transpiring that we need to be aware of. And so we thought we'd just add that there just because it tied in nicely with the artificial sweeteners that we talked about earlier. But back to kombucha. Here is another popular. So we kind of pull these from kombuchas that are more readily available at grocery stores here in Canada, local grocery stores. However, you could probably find some nicer ones at a farmer's market that we're able to track the fermentation process a little better. The reason why we added this one here was because you can see that the total sugars are 12 grams with no added sugars or artificial sweeteners. And this might indicate that the company is adding more sugar at the beginning of the brewing stage with hopes of that sweet taste lasting through the fermentation process instead of it being lost, like we talked about earlier, how the sugar gets lost or the sweet taste gets lost through that fermentation process as it's converted into acetic acid. And so that's just one thing we wanted to mention, because it can be difficult when you're looking at all these kombuchas, which one is really the best one to buy. And on the next slide, we have some things to look out for, essentially. So like we said, sugar content, it's always a good idea to check the nutrition label to see if there's added sugars after fermentation. If the total sugars are a lot higher, it may imply that they added more sugar in the brewing process. And then also if there's artificial sweeteners that are added. As well as this packaging is another thing. The ideal packaging for kombucha is a dark glass bottle that protects the probiotics from light, UV, and then also there's some studies that, or some sources that sort of state that sometimes the probiotics can interact with metals and affect the probiotic components. So ideally, glass bottles are really the ideal way, especially if you're making them at home. As well as this, to check ingredients. Ingredients in kombucha should really only include water, tea, SCOBY, minimal sugar, and then, if anything, natural flavorings. And then also to just keep an eye on alcohol. Some kombuchas are marketed with more alcohol, so it's always a good idea to read those labels. And then here we just have some potential kombucha risks. So if you're preparing kombucha at home, contamination may cause harmful bacteria if you aren't handling it properly or being sanitary, and it can cause mold to also grow in the mixture. So it's important to make sure that your hands and equipment are all sanitary during preparation and all processes, all stages of the fermentation process, to ensure that you're not contaminating your mixture. As well as this excess consumption is linked to GI symptoms and symptoms like bloating, nausea, and diarrhea. So an idea here would just be to consider smaller consumptions. If you're not used to kombucha, the CDC's recommendation is actually a max of 4 ounces per day. That's a lot more than in a normal can here, or in a normally someone would consume. However, because there are mixed findings on kombucha, you'll find some say that you can consume 12 ounces a day, 4 ounces a day. It's a good idea to just to give it a try first and consider smaller consumptions at first. And then we just wanted to add some populations that might avoid kombucha. One thing to note here is that some kombuchas are unpasteurized in order to retain probiotics, and thus they might contain alcohol and harmful bacteria. So companies might opt for pasteurization in order to lengthen its shelf life and sell it unrefrigerated. And because of this, pregnant women and women that are breastfeeding should avoid kombucha, just because not only the alcohol risk, but also because there might be some harmful microbes, as well as children. Just once again, that potential alcohol content with the excess sugars, and then also individuals with weakened immune systems, as once again that unpasteurized kombucha might indicate might lend to harmful microbes, and then also individuals with liver disease. This isn't as common, but there has been associations with liver toxicity and inflammation. Very rare. There's a few cases. So those are just some populations that might want to approach kombucha with some discretion before they decide to drink it more commonly. And I believe on our last slide, and I am no kombucha master, I have yet to try making my own. So this is merely a recipe that we did find. And what I'd like to highlight here, just because we talked about it earlier, is just those steps of the first step being SCOBY preparation. That takes about 1 to 4 weeks, but you're essentially, if you don't have SCOBY from someone else that you could borrow, add store-bought kombucha. But if you have no kombucha, you can make SCOBY with commercial yeast, yeast nutrients, and lactic acid cultures, which you can add to the tea. These things can be purchased from different websites and sources, but it does require a few steps before you get to the actual fermentation process to have that SCOBY. And you're preparing that with the sweetened tea and also fermenting that. And one thing to mention here is to use, once again, we mentioned a large glass jar, covering it with layers of cloth to prevent, to keep it in a dark space away from any light, and then to store it at room temperature. And the second step is the first fermentation process, or alcohol fermentation with the yeast. That takes about 6 to 10 days. This is what's making the actual kombucha. Same steps of preparing the sweetened tea and placing the SCOBY gently on top, and then sealing it as well. And then that second acetic acid fermentation with bacteria is about 3 to 10 days, and this is what's carbonating the kombucha. So you're just going to strain the kombucha, seal it again, and ferment it, or keep it in the dark place again for 3 to 10 days. And then you'll have your kombucha. However, I would like to get this fact checked by someone who's actually made kombucha before. So Dr. Curnew, do you have any things you'd like to add about?
Yeah, well, first of all, I want you to backtrack a few slides. I want to show you that one commercial. Go back a little bit more. Go back one more. Go back a couple more. Stop. So this is, go back. No, show that. So this is a commercial available. Look at this. This is 5 calories. Has no sugar. Has potassium. This looks pretty darn healthy. And it is healthy. And the biggest thing is it is pricey. Next slide, please. Go back to the other kombucha there, and stop here. This one actually has more sugar content. Now, next slide. Go back to your last slide at the end. Is that so? What happens at our house? It goes through 2 fermentation processes, or 2 steps to this, and I truly don't know how much sugar is still left over at this point. I haven't measured that. I'm not the most sanitary guy available. My wife does a good job of that. We got our this was SCOBY from a friend who gave us that, and this has been a wonderful addition. If you look at that, and my favorite flavors, and we try different things. We just throw berries in them. I love blueberries, but basically my favorite flavor right now is ginger and lemon. Um, it is wonderful. Um, and I think this is it's a very I'm seeing a lot of health benefits, and if there's something wrong with the SCOBY, and we'll talk about that in a separate webinar, what a healthy SCOBY looks like and things of that nature as well. This is a wonderful process, and it's something that um, my wife likes red wine. I like SCOBY and or a kombucha right now. And I worry about alcohol consumption for many of us, including my wife and things of that nature. But this has been my replacement to alcohol. 20 years ago, on a hot sunny day, I used to like a hard lemonade or Smirnoff. Um, and this is just how I replaced it at this point in time. And it lowers my blood sugar, it lowers my triglycerides, and it has all these potential bacterial properties that are beneficial. But we don't know that for sure. We're still learning. And so again, I'm gonna. So what I do with mine is I dilute with water sometimes. And thank you for sharing that. So this is just one option right now. So I learned over time is that water is a very important beverage. It's number one beverage, and the Canadian recommendations is water is the number one beverage. Growing up, I used to drink a lot of milk. I replaced that with a lot of the oat milk, soy milks, and these plant-based milks. Uh, I um, I have to be careful I get enough calcium at this point in time because vegetarians are often calcium deficient in their diets, and traditionally over half our calcium comes from dairy products. So think about that. Getting proper protein, you can get that from beans very easily. So this has actually been a transformation of my time, and actually my triglycerides have gone down over time. It's making it easier to control weight. Nothing's easy to control weight. These are helpful things. So this has been wonderful. Is there any other slides? This is our last slide. I can't remember.
There is like a quick section on teas.
Perfect. Let's hear about
Judy,
tea.
you can go quickly
Yeah.
over
A
it.
very, very quick section. Yeah, just now that we've kind of treaded some foreign territory and learned about kombucha, we'll just kind of go back to some familiar territory and enough there. Just to, like reaffirm some of the benefits of teas. So we're going to be taking a look at these types of teas, which are, they have been backed up by research to be very helpful for weight loss, among other positive health benefits. So just to look at green tea first, it is very effective for weight loss and body fat loss. So, one important thing to note about green tea is it was kind of mentioned by Angela earlier, but there's like polyphenols and catechins, which are naturally occurring antioxidants that increase the metabolism of fats in your body. So one study revealed that individuals in the green tea condition versus the control group, they actually lost on average 0.2 to 3.5 more kilograms over 12 weeks. The next one we're just going to quickly look at is called pure tea. So it's a type of fermented Chinese tea. And it's also been shown to help lower blood sugar and also regulate fatty acid metabolism, helping you burn that extra fat in your body. So in doing that, it also helps to reduce things like body weight, BMI, also triglycerides, and cholesterol. So in one study, it was shown that individuals who were receiving this pure capsules lost 2.2 pounds more than the people who were in the placebo group. So they're receiving a placebo capsule after 3 months. Okay, the next one we'll just quickly look at is black tea, and it receives its color from having longer periods of oxidation. So this is one thing you can look out for. It gives more of like a bitter taste. Black tea also contains a lot of polyphenols and also something called flavones, which also have antioxidant properties and promote weight loss while reducing calorie absorption. And one really, really long longitudinal study that took place over 14 whole years found that individuals who had higher flavone intake from foods like black tea actually experienced a lot smaller increases in BMI than the individuals who didn't. The next one we want to quickly look at is oolong tea. So this one similarly has effects like weight loss and fat burning, with a study backing this up to also show that people who drink oolong tea twice a day for 14 days in a row experienced increased fat burning by 20%. And lastly, white tea is another type that's been proven to be effective in these regards. So it's the most minimally processed or least oxidized tea out of all of these, and it has been also been proven to improve oral health and contribute to killing cancer cells. And like green tea, it's also very rich in catechins, so it increases body fat metabolism as proven by studies as well. So before we quickly end off, just to recap some of the common advantages and disadvantages of these teas. First is that they contain antioxidants, which has been a very much recurring topic in our webinar today. So they help weight loss and also they lower risk of heart attack by 14%. Teas also have lower caffeine contents compared to coffee, so they can make for potential healthier alternatives. And they're also a very rich source of magnesium, which is good for the heart and your arteries. So it can lead to things like lower stroke risk, also lower anxiety, and also boosted immune system functions. And lastly, these teas contain an element called fluoride, so that can also help avoid tooth decay and strengthen your teeth against bacteria and infections. So some of the disadvantages, these only really arise when you consume too much of the tea, but one of them is that it can lead to reduced mineral absorption, and that mainly is affiliated with the high polyphenol content. And in that case, you should take potential like iron-rich food sources to make up for potential iron deficiencies. But again, keep in mind this only happens if you drink too much tea. And also, if you drink too much, you could experience things like nausea and also acidity because some compounds in tea could stimulate the stomach to produce excessive acid. So you could experience heartburn if you're not careful. So to avoid these effects, simply remember that any drink other than water should always be drunk in moderation.
And with that, we've reached the end. I feel like we all need a drink of a healthy beverage after that long journey. The conclusion we have here before Dr. Curnew makes his conclusion is that we're really getting away from these sugary sweetened beverages. We're finding these intermediates that can help us. They still have sugars or they might have artificial sweeteners, but they're helping us progress into really the healthiest option, which is water. I've added an orange here just to go back to the fruit juice one, but really water is our big contender over here. And Dr. Curnew kind of mentioned the Canadian Food Guide earlier, but the recommendation from the Canadian Food Guide is to make water your drink of choice. Water is really, it is the answer to what this class on what's in your glass. What's in your glass should really be water. But it's okay. It's okay to have a little treat yourself once in a while. But Doctor, do you want to add anything on this slide?
I think that was just wonderful. I learned so much at this point in time is that you can see, look at the food plate, how that's changed over time. At one time dairy was put in there as a great source of beverage, but now we changed that, and you gave us some avenues to explore. One of the questions that Joni, maybe you can comment on chai tea. What exactly is that? Where does that fit into things? And to me, this has been a total evolution over time, and is that there's actually randomized data. If you take 2 glasses of water the start of every meal, so 6 glasses of water a day, in randomized data, you will actually lose 5 pounds. And that's how that should be the appetizer. One question about tea and coffee is that they contain substances that prevent absorption of micronutrients, especially in particular iron and maybe other substances as well. So the advice to drinking tea and coffee is to drink it an hour or so after your meal. Most of us don't do that. In the morning time we start off with a cup of coffee, and then you might eat something, and at night after a meal you'll share a cup of coffee with desserts, and hopefully there'll be more berries and things of nature as well. But ideally, if you want to get absorption of micronutrients, is that you should delay that. Now, one of the things that people are doing is that there's a multivitamin for men, or if we get one for women, for kids and things of that nature. We are spending $800 billion worldwide on supplements. These are potentially totally useless or very little value. And you mentioned the micronutrients in food. Mother Nature has a secret sauce, a secret formula. We're trying to reproduce it, but we haven't been able to. And so to health is basically the symphony of food that you mentioned over here. This is what we should be striving for, and water should be a beverage, and how to make life fun and different things in nature as well. Uh, doesn't mean you can't have a drink, but it's not a health food. It doesn't mean that you can't have a Diet Coke, but I stopped drinking fruit juices. I stopped drinking regular pop. I like bubbly from time to time. I'm starting to enjoy kombucha. Uh, I'm interested now exploring things. Tell me about chai tea, and tell me. And I have bad teeth, so I need to think about the fluoride content of tea. So thank you. Anything else you want to add to that about chai tea, other teas there? Tell us about fluoride
Yeah.
content one more time.
Yeah, yeah, the fluoride content definitely just helps strengthen your teeth. Kind of helps strengthen them to fight against potential like bacteria infections. And just like you said, like staggering the time interval between when you drink tea is going to be very helpful because yeah, like we said, like consuming too much can definitely prevent like iron absorption deficiency. So drinking it, like Dr. Curnew said, like an hour after eating or so will definitely help you kind of um obtain the best benefits like antioxidants, lower inflammation, all of that we talked about. And for the vitamin absorption sort of thing that we were talking about, we kind of have a segment in our Dish on Dash webinar from last time where we explain how taking supplements is definitely not the same as natural sources because when you're consuming the vitamins naturally, they're kind of combined with other nutrients like fats and carbs that really maximally aid the absorption because that's just how, like you said, Mother Nature designed it. So they're definitely better than supplements.
We did have one more slide. It's just our goal for everyone who's watching today who might be trying to give up. Oh, it's buffering. Okay, well, hopefully you get the point there. We're trying to
Replace your
replace
Cokes for
the
bubbly.
evil villain today. Um, there we go.
Yep.
Wonderful. Well, listen, I think we went over time. That's my fault. So much information. I want to thank the entire crew. I thank Carol for joining us tonight and others as well. I'm not sure if anybody has any questions. Any questions out there, Carol? Anybody else? I think Carol, you're muted.
I am. Sorry. This gadget and me. But anyway, no, I've been using kombucha off and on, for the last year, I guess, and trying to, but I'm enjoying it, but I use it occasionally. Thank you very much. This has been very informative. And this Thursday night is better than Friday night.
Yeah, we're going to try different times, different spaces as well. I'm going to give Daniel and Amir the last word.
Oh, thank you very much, you
Thank you.
folks.
Well
It's
done.
enlightening.
Yeah, I guess I'll start off, and then Amir, if you wanna finish off. I think the team is honestly, I'm gonna keep this short because I know, like you said, Dr. Curnew, we've probably gone a little over time here. I think the team has put on a fantastic sort of overview of all the different health drinks. I've learned a lot, especially about oolong, because I've been a big fan of that, and I didn't realize that, how much health. Actually, for all those teas, actually, like all the different health benefits. I do also want to give a shout out um, to the previous webinar we did that Anjana and Junie did a lovely webinar on about alcohol. It's called To Drink or Not to Drink. We're gonna put a description, or we're gonna put a link to that in the description, because I think a lot of these drinks that we've learned about today are really good healthier alternatives to alcohol, like kombucha, tea, just something to get the satisfaction of drinking something, right? They could be healthy alternatives like you guys have talked about. So that'll be in the description, but I just want to give a big thanks as well to the whole team for putting this all together.
Yeah. I think Daniel put it really nicely. It was a really informative webinar. I learned a lot as well. I think it was really interesting, the discussion on artificial sweeteners. Yeah, we think that there's no effect from taking them, but we should use them as transitions to healthier drinks like water. So yeah, I learned a lot. Thank you guys. This is great.
Well, listen, I'm gonna bid everybody a good night and a good beverage, and we will see you all real soon. And keep healthy and get healthy, everybody.
Be back. See you Wednesday night.
Good night,
Mhm.
everyone.
Good
Good
night.
everybody.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.